one day and told me, "Lord, show me that I think you're a bad boy." I told him I didn't. The religious world was shocked when John Copeland quit as CEO of Kenneth Copeland Ministries and his family's multi-million-dollar ministry empire. His sudden departure made many people wonder about possible revelations that could bring down one of the world's largest prosperity gospel groups, and this in-depth piece explores deeply. The story of John Copeland's time at KCM and the events that led to his departure is told through private conversations and written evidence that shows how these revelations affect the Copeland family, their ministry, and the prosperity gospel movement as a whole. Then there's Kenneth Copeland's story, which starts with pop music and ends with private jets and a worldwide ministry empire. This man who became one of the biggest names in the prosperity gospel movement. In the late 1950s, he started writing love songs. His single Pledge of Love made it all the way to the top 40 charts, and he even performed on American Bandstand. It's kind of interesting to think about how someone's life can change so quickly, from being a pop singer to building a ministry worth millions of dollars. Kenneth Copeland's son has finally broken his silence, and the secrets he's telling are making headlines all over the world. Revealed secrets about ministry, family life, or something much more shocking will shock you, and the truth behind them is even more unbelievable. Don't look away, the ending will have everyone talking. Well, Kenneth's life changed when he had a spiritual awakening that led him to Oral Roberts University. He didn't just study there, he also worked directly with Oral Roberts as his pilot and chauffeur. Imagine being in your 20s and driving one of the most famous televangelists around while also flying his plane. Talk about being at the right place at the right time. But Kenneth didn't stop there. That experience sparked something in him, and by the late 1960s, he was ready to start his own ministry with his wife, Gloria. In 1967, he started Kenneth Copeland Ministries KCM, and little did anyone know that it would soon become a global operation with millions of followers. Kenneth's journey from pop singer to preacher wasn't just a leap of faith, it was a calculated leap into the teachings of prosperity gospel, which he spent 7 days immersed in. When he realized that Kenneth Hagin's teachings about faith, health, and wealth as divine promises, he wasn't just starting a ministry, he was starting a movement. KCM quickly grew into something much bigger than just a church. They had prayer networks, disaster relief programs, published materials, digital content, and international conferences. They were everywhere, and they also had offices in Canada, Africa, Asia, Australia, Europe, and Ukraine. This wasn't just a church. When you build something big, people naturally start to question it, and let's be honest, Copeland's finances have always been a bit of a hot topic. For starters, KCM's 500-acre campus near Fort Worth is not your average church setup. It has a church, a private airstrip, an aircraft hangar, and a $6 million mansion that the ministry owns. Oh, and don't forget the private jets. Yes, they even bought one from Tyler Perry. Copeland has always defended these costs, saying that they're necessary for. People are naturally skeptical when they hear that he preaches the gospel on a private jet. It's hard for some people to believe. The thing is, KCM is a church, which gives them a level of privacy that most nonprofits could only dream of. Critics have long questioned the ministry's financial transparency. Public records from the 1990s showed that Kenneth made $364,500 a year and Gloria made $292,500. That's a pretty sweet paycheck for the nines, don't you think? It looks like the preacher of divine blessings has gotten more than his fair share. But it gets even more interesting. KCM isn't just about starting or running a church. They also found oil and gas fields on their property and used them to make money through a company called Security Petrol. They say it's to avoid liability risks, but critics say it's a sneaky way to blur the lines between nonprofit and for-profit work. Business activities, it's like a web of religion and business, and no one can quite tell where one ends and the other begins. What happens when the son of a world-famous evangelist decides to speak out? The truth is shocking and heartbreaking, and you won't believe how this story ends. Pay close attention because every detail counts. John Copeland's journey within KCM, growing up in the Copeland family, wasn't exactly the norm. Imagine having parents who were leaders of one of the most influential. John Copeland, son of Kenneth and Gloria Copeland, had to deal with the expectations of living under the spiritual spotlight and learning the ropes of ministry life from a very young age. It wasn't just about going to church every Sunday, it was about living the ministry every single day. How do you think that shapes a person? Well, let's look into John's story to find out. As a child, John Copeland probably ran around not in his backyard but in Kenneth Copeland Ministries, where his parents were building their empire. His father, Kenneth, was always described as steadfast and committed, and John would often say that there were no two sides to him. Isn't that the kind of consistency you'd expect from someone who leads millions of people on their spiritual journey? Of course, it wasn't all sermons from the Bible. John was very independent, especially when he was a teenager, but even when he wanted to make his own way. It's one thing to hear about faith on Sundays, it's another thing to see it lived out every day. Wouldn't that stick with you too? As John got older, it became clear that ministry wasn't just something he was born into, it was something he was going to lead. He worked his way up through the ranks of Kenneth Copeland Ministries and eventually became. John was CEO for 22 years, which meant he was in charge of more than just church events. His job included everything from international operations to financial planning, and he was in charge of a staff of about 500 people. That's a lot of people to keep an eye on. Under John's leadership, the ministry didn't just keep its reach, it grew. They had multiple income streams, such as donations, media content, and global outreach initiatives. The scale was huge and the impact was clear. Despite all of this, John didn't lose sight of his desire to be an entrepreneur. In 1993, he decided to start his own business, which he called El Rancho Fe, or the Ranch of Faith. He leased land from the church to start a cattle and horse business, which eventually turned into a big venture. Can you believe the property value went from $93,000 to over time? That's some serious growth. It's like he was putting the faith and determination that he learned from his parents into this business, who says ministry and entrepreneurship don't mix. Being Kenneth Copeland's son, however, did come with its own set of challenges. How do you balance leading a globally recognized ministry with staying true to yourself? That was the tightrope that John had to walk. His father taught him important lessons about faith, fear, and honesty, which became the foundation of John's leadership style. And here's the great thing, he's now teaching these values to his own children, making sure that they are passed down in a way that is both honest and faithful. The Copeland legacy continues to grow. Could Kenneth Copeland's perfect reputation be hiding something? His son has just come forward with revelations that are both shocking and unbelievable. What secrets could a man of his stature be keeping? This story has layers you won't expect, and the ending will change everything. Stay tuned, you won't want to miss a second of this behind closed doors at KCM Kenneth Copeland Ministries. KCM has always been interesting, but things are changing. When the Senate's Finance Committee started an investigation into the ministry, things really took a dramatic turn. The details they found were nothing short of eye-opening. Imagine peeling back the layers of a huge organization that's always had an air of mystery, only to find a web of financial complexity, employee fears, and a culture of secrecy. It's interesting, right? It also makes you wonder, how does a ministry of this size really work behind the scenes? Well, here it is. First, Kenneth Copeland Ministries' finances are like a maze. This wasn't your average nonprofit church, it was an entire empire with a 1,500-acre campus that includes a private airstrip, a maintenance hangar, and even oil and gas fields that bring in money. On top of that, global media networks broadcast sermons all over the world. It's almost like KCM was a. When the Senate Finance Committee started looking into it, it was said that KCM and a few other ministries refused to fully cooperate. That just makes you wonder what they were so afraid to share. Now let's talk about those jets, because they became a big topic of conversation. Kenneth Copeland defended owning several planes, including a Gulfstream 5 that he bought from Tyler Perry, saying that flying commercially would have harmed about 65% of his business. He said that these planes weren't just expensive toys, but important tools for spreading the gospel. The breaking point 2017 was a big year for Kenneth Copeland Ministries KCM. CEO John Copeland suddenly quit after 22 years of service. John's departure left a lot of people wondering what happened, why now, and what this meant for the future of such a powerful organization. The events that led up to John's departure weren't something that. Not overnight, it was more like a slow build-up, the kind where you don't realize how bad things have gotten until something gives way. Being the CEO of such a big ministry as KCM wasn't easy. John had to deal with a lot of problems. For example, John's father, Kenneth Copeland, had the final say on all decisions made by the ministry's board. Imagine leading a team where you didn't really have the final say. How frustrating that must have been at times. There were also growing questions about how the ministry was being run. Managed its money. This wasn't just a few dollars here and there, it was big stuff like property deals, plane purchases, and large amounts of money going into the organization. The staff reportedly started pushing for more openness about salaries and financial dealings, and who could blame them? If you work for a place that preaches prosperity and blessings, wouldn't you want to know how the money was being handled? Insiders hinted at deeper problems that had been building for a while. Years later, the Senate Finance Committee started an investigation into KCM, pushing them to be more open about their financial dealings. Can you imagine the stress that must have been on John? He was stuck between staying true to his family and being responsive to growing calls for change within the organization. Money seemed to be a major issue, which, let's be honest, isn't a surprise when you're talking about a prosperity gospel. The ministry KCM fought hard against questions about compensation, even though records from 1995 showed the Copeland family getting $1.5 million in combined pay and benefits. That's a lot of money, especially for a ministry that says it serves the spiritual needs of its followers. You can bet that the public noticed this, which only added fuel to the fire. Then there's the personal side of this. John's decision to leave wasn't just a professional one, it had effects on his family. The Copeland family for years, the Copeland family put on a united front, the kind of picture-perfect image you'd expect from a famous religious family, but when John stepped down, cracks started to show in that facade. How could they not? Even after John left, Kenneth Copeland stayed on as chairman of the board and had tight control over the direction of the ministry. But the leadership changes that John's departure caused brought new problems. It wasn't just about finding someone to take his place, it was about putting decades of work and trust to the test. It makes you wonder if it was worth it. Did the Copeland family sit down at the dinner table and talk about it, or was it something that was left unsaid? John's departure sparked a lot of talk about whether it was a clean break or if there were deeper problems that hadn't come to light yet. What about the future of KCM? Could it continue? Some were devoted to the message and mission, while others weren't so sure. TBN's marketing director Nate Daniels said that the decision to part ways with KCM was very difficult. When someone says something like that, it's probably the understatement of the year. But it wasn't just about KCM, it was about how the whole idea of prosperity gospel was being received. In a world that was changing, people weren't as quick to embrace the old stories, and TBN's programming choices reflected that shift. Still, KCM? Not one to go out quietly, Kenneth Copeland spoke out against the changes directly on the ministry's website to reassure followers. He even thanked BBN for their years of partnership, which, let's be honest, was a classy move. He also directed people to other platforms where they could still watch their favorite shows. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To read more exciting stories, click on the